Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here for another one of our Hilltop Outreach Institute workshop events. We're very excited to have you here again on a Saturday. We know you have lots going on in your lives between parenting and teaching and just doing what you do. So thanks for making the time to be here. My name is Becky Krieger. I am the outreach coordinator and faculty life coach at Hilltop, and I help moderate these events. And I see a lot of familiar faces here as well as some newcomers. So that's great to have a mixed group here today. Just a few housekeeping reminders for you all. I see you're already doing a lot of this. That is, please keep your mute on during the presentation portion of the workshop. There will be opportunities for you to come off of mute. We'll have small breakout sessions as well as large group opportunities for conversation and reflection. And utilize that chat feature. You know, put your questions in there. We'll be monitoring that throughout the workshop. Any insights or just supportive comments that you want to share with the group, please, we encourage you to do that. If you are able to have your video on, we also really appreciate that as well, just so we can see each other's faces and have that connection in a virtual space. I also know that some of you are commuting or taking care of children or family members today, so no stress if you can't have your video on. That being said, when we do go into breakout rooms, even if you have to have your video off, if you're able to come off mute at times and participate, that will be much appreciated and will really contribute to the learning of the group. So I am so thrilled to welcome back Mr. Chazz Lewis to our Institute series. Many of you are big fans of Chazz, who has an incredible social media presence and podcast, as well as YouTube channel. And Chazz has also presented for our Institute in the past. For those of you who are new to Chazz, he is an educator, a parent coach, a podcaster, facilitator, who envisions a world where teachers, parents, and students wake up every day inspired to learn. He is committed to helping parents and teachers develop their children in a way that is less frustrating and more enjoyable and effective for everyone. Doesn't that sound great? His mission is for you to be able to see, guide, and build trust with children. And I'm going to be sharing several resources with you throughout the workshop today as well as afterwards, and I will be sure to put a link to Chazz's page where you can access all of his social media as well as his Patreon group and potentially sign up for some parent coaching with him if that's something that interests you. So thank you, Chazz, for being here. Thank you all for being in this learning space with us. So before I hand the mic off to Chazz, we're going to begin as we always do, with just pausing for a land acknowledgement. And we've spoken many times before about how land acknowledgement is not a new practice. It's a traditional custom dating back many centuries from Native communities. And it's a simple but important way of resisting the erasure of Indigenous histories and working towards honoring and inviting the truth. So I invite you to come into the space that you are in and just really ground into the chair or the seat that you are sitting in. And just come into the acknowledgement that wherever you are calling in from today, you are on stolen Indigenous lands. If you are calling in from the state of Washington, where I am, you are on the land of the Coast Salish people. If you're calling in from what is today known as King County, you are on the land of the Duwamish, Suquamish, the Muckleshoot, and the Snoqualmie tribes. And if you are in the city that is known today as Seattle, you are also on the land of the Duwamish people, actually named after the chief of the Duwamish people. And we especially acknowledge and honor the leadership and wisdom of our Indigenous community and their land sustainability practices, their modeling of a democratic society, and their ongoing efforts in the protection and reclaiming of Native languages and cultural practices. So today, Chazz is going to be talking to us about the importance of regulating ourselves so that we can approach children's behaviors with curiosity and empathy. And this is a lesson that we can apply not only to our relationships with our kids, but also to our personal journeys of learning the truth of our history of colonization and white supremacy. And that when we feel triggered, whether it's in the form of shame or fear or defensiveness around learning the truth of our nation's history, we can actually take that as a cue to calm our nervous system and go deeper into that learning rather than turn away from it. We can help remind each other that white supremacy culture is always operating in implicit and explicit ways in our society. And that when we commit to work towards decolonization, even when it hurts and is uncomfortable, we actually reduce white supremacy's power. So please continue to do what you can with the resources that you have to support land reparations and restorative justice for Indigenous people at both the local and the national level. Keep learning about your local tribe and keep finding ways to engage in this work with your children, your families, and each other. And I'll go ahead and drop some resources in the chat so that you can find more ways to continue this work. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic over to Mr. Chazz. Chazz, thank you so much for being here.
I am happy to be here. Thank you for everyone who is here as well. We have a pretty small group, smaller than what I'm used to, which I love because that means we get to have more of a back and forth conversation, more opportunities to individualize this session that can really help you with what you're actually struggling with. And so I just want to start off by, if you could put in the chat just what, like if you're a parent or you're a teacher, kind of what age are your children that you parent or are teaching, so I can already kind of start to get a good sense of who is in the room and already start to individualize the session from the beginning. And I will, as you're doing that, I will start to share my screen. Let's start this. Oh, what's going on? This is always in the way. Oh, it's there already. Okay. So let's see who is here. Online training for adults, educator working with 3 to 5-year-olds, hilltop teacher, 1.5 to 2-year-olds. Keep them coming. I would love to hear where everyone is coming from. And as you guys are getting that in, I'll tell you a little bit about me. So I started off as a Montessori teacher, and then I became, I'll do the condensed version about me. And if you'd like to hear more about me, then feel free to ask in the chat. But I really want to spend this time diving into content and getting to know you guys. So I started off as a Montessori teacher. I struggled a lot when I started, didn't really know what to do. I did a lot of the traditional ways of teaching and guiding children, a lot of threats and punishments, realized that that's not the person or the teacher that I wanted to be. So I started to look to find a different way, because I was like, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be some other way than what we are currently doing. And even in a Montessori classroom, there were people who were like my co-teachers and people that I was learning from. They still were teaching with all of the kind of stuff that they grew up with some Montessori sprinkled in there. More than sprinkled in there. They were definitely doing a lot of the Montessori stuff, but they still had their own stuff that they were not necessarily aware of, and didn't show a huge interest in really overcoming and trying a different way. I did try a different way, and along my journey, I was making a lot of mistakes, a lot of mess ups. But that really helped me learn more and grow my perspective more. ended up becoming a lead teacher. They started to kind of shuffle in the kids who were having a hard time in other classrooms and in my classroom. And although at the time I probably would not have said this, but in reflection, I'm really thankful for all of those kids who had behaviors that challenged me, because without those kids, I would not have been able to grow into the person that I am today, as a teacher and as a person. So I am really thankful for those kids. At the time, it doesn't really feel that way as you're struggling and trying to figure things out. But in reflection, I can for sure with confidence say I am so thankful for those kids. Teachers started to kind of come to me just asking about just how I, really struggling with their own kind of behaviors in the classroom, and just asking about how they handle certain situations. I was kind of casually offering advice in the break room, and they would come back and be like, wow, this has been really impactful. This has impacted which you said yesterday, impacted the rest of my day and the rest of this child's day. I need more. And so I kind of casually just started, kind of became a thing where I was offering advice in the break room. Then a light bulb went off, and just me recognizing that I love the impact that I'm making with my little community of humans. But if I could reach more teachers, then that impact could be exponential. So I became an educational specialist, and my role was to go to different different schools and classrooms and support teachers, directors, and children with whatever they were struggling with. So the kids that were, tearing up classrooms, throwing chairs and hitting teachers, they would call me in to find ways to support and just really assess the situation and find ways that everyone can be successful. The teacher, the children, the families. So I was doing that for a while until the pandemic hit, and most teachers went home, most kids went home. My job started to look a little different, and that's when another light bulb went off of just really just came from seeing parents struggle being the 24/7 everything for children, and just noticing a lot of the things that parents were struggling with. I had struggled with in the past, and had learned kind of different ways to guide children. And so I started to make videos. My thought process was, I can make short videos that are easy to consume, and you feel like your perspective has expanded a little bit, or you feel like you have a new tool to practice at the end of a short little 1-minute video, that I can make a pretty big impact and help a lot of parents and teachers out there. And so I started making videos. It resonated with a lot of people. And people would, again, come getting feedback like, wow, this is, my relationship with my child has changed, like it's for the better, and the information that you're sharing is really truly life-changing. And so that has just kind of grown into not just TikTok videos. It's on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, and it also turned into a podcast. Part of the Mr. Chazz Leadership Parenting and Teaching podcast, and part of the thought process with the podcast is that I remember when I was really struggling in the beginning of my journey and trying to find resources and find community, people who were using more connection and collaborative based strategies rather than fear and control based strategies. And I struggled to find kind of those resources that really resonated with me in the beginning. And so every podcast episode, I introduce you to a different resource that can help you on your parenting or teaching journey. So that way, the idea is that you can listen to the podcast, find people that you really resonate with, and kind of create your own little community of people that you like to learn from, and that will help you along on your journey. Because I know that was really important for me on my journey. So, and it's grown in other things. I do speaking in person, and the podcast is really great, and the social media stuff is great. But the challenge with that is that I'm not able to individualize those pieces of content as much. I can dive deeper to the nuance in my podcast than I can on the short little social media videos, but I can't individualize it because every child, every parent, every teacher, every person is different. So that is why I do the one-on-one coaching too, because I really do love individualizing all of this stuff, because we are very unique. Humans are complex, living in a complex world with complex relationships. So I really love diving deep into that. So that is a little bit about me and kind of my journey of getting here. And I'm just looking at, and when I became an educational specialist, I knew that relationships are the foundation for everything. That if I was going to be guiding teachers and children, that I would have to be able to establish some kind of relationship with them. And that was a big challenge when, there are thousands of children and hundreds of teachers. And the challenge was like, how am I going to build relationship with all these people so that I can really get to work and start really supporting and guiding and helping people. And so I use my favorite teacher tool, use songs, and I made a little name song for myself. And I would go into classrooms and I'd be like, what's my name? Mr. Chazz. What's my name? Mr. Chazz. What's my name? Mr. Chazz, Mr. Chazz, Mr. Chazz. And I would freeze like that. Zoom's not frozen, but I would freeze like that. And it would kind of, laugh. And then I kind of go, I do it again. I'd say, what's my name? Mr. Chazz. What's my name? Mr. Chazz. What's my name? Mr. Chazz, Mr. Chazz, Mr. Chazz. Right. And so I would do this kind of going into the, different classrooms. And this didn't really, just doing that did not build the relationship with everyone, but what it did is that it created a door for them to open. So like if I'm around and they see me, I'm talking to someone, even walking by, they could say, hey, Mr. Chazz, they now know my name. And now then I can stop and kind of turn to them and then give them, my attention to actually really connect with them and really open that door of connection and open the door of that relationship. And so that was kind of a way to just really create that door, to open the door to truly start to build a relationship and really start to intentionally connect with them. And connection has 4 components: eye contact, touch, playful situation, and presence. Eye contact, touch, playful situation, and presence. 4 components of connection. So in those moments, I could stop and pause and really offer that, really be present for them, and really connect with them. So that is a little bit about me and how I got started. And I already, even in my introduction, already gave a little nugget there with the connection piece that you can use with your children, whether you're a parent or a teacher, to be more intentional about connection. Because a lot of people say, like we connect, like I've given the child a lot of connection. But sometimes because we don't know about those 4 components of connection. You don't have to do all 4 components all the time. You can mix and match them. You can do 1 or 2 or the other. You can do all 4. But knowing that allows you to be more intentional about when you're connecting with them and about your connection, and really kind of almost filling up that connection bucket. So that like if you are spending time connecting with them, that you can get kind of more bang for your buck, and that time is money, right? And so that you can really make that time really valuable. There's, I don't know who the quote comes from, but the whole thing of it's better to give 100% of your attention 10% of the time than 10% of your attention 100% of the time, right? So that is the first nugget. Now, in my journey, I have really kind of broken all of this stuff down to 3 words. see, guide, trust. And the idea is that we have to really be able to see a person before we're able to effectively guide a person. Now, this isn't just true for children. This is true for us adults too. I mean, think about your experience as, as someone working, right? Have you had a leader? Have you had a leader that has really, you felt seen by, you felt understood by, you felt connected to? Those are the leaders you're probably at your best, with. Those are probably the leaders that you probably go above and beyond for, right? If you've been lucky enough to have a leader like that. Now, most of us, now not everyone's necessarily had a leader like that, but most of us have had a leader on the opposite side of the spectrum. The leader that we don't feel seen by, we feel disconnected, that they don't understand our work and what we do, and they just push a bunch of stuff down and say, do it because I said so, do it because, this is what I said to do, so just do it, don't ask questions, just do it. And those are the leaders that we're probably not at our best for. Those are probably the leaders that you hear other people talking about and gossiping about it. You might do the thing that they tell you to do because your job is on the line. You got to survive. So you might comply and do the thing that they're telling you to do. But then, you might be more inclined or likely to be like this once they walk out the room, like, this person has no idea what they're talking about. Can't you believe this person? They think, calling them all types of names with everyone else who's experiencing the same thing. And this doesn't just happen. I know this happens across organizations. So this happens in all kinds of leadership positions. Whether you're a parent, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a leader in the government, this happens all the time. So we need to be able to see a person before we're able to effectively guide a person. And seeing a person does two huge things. One, or once we actually see a person, it's illuminating. So we're actually able to, our guidance is actually able to connect with them, and we're actually able to give guidance that connects with them, that reaches them, as opposed to what we traditionally do, which is we're kind of trying to guide them in the dark. We're trying to reach, we're not really connecting with them. We're just kind of throwing guidance at the wall, hoping that it sticks. But when we see a person, then we're actually able to offer guidance that is helpful for them from their perspective, right? And the other big thing that seeing a person does is that you are also able to, when a person feels seen, they're more willing to go on that journey with you. Right? When a person doesn't feel seen, a lot of times what we do, we're trying to just guide a person without seeing them first. We're trying to drag them along on the journey. And they're we're dragging them along and they're pushing back and fighting back. And you don't get very far when you're on a journey with someone and you're fighting against each other, right? And they're pushing back, constantly. But when a person feels seen, it increases willingness. They're more willing to go on that journey. And so we're able to get a lot farther in that journey and teach a lot more. Scrambling of the four components, and I'll bring it up again. So awesome. So, and then there's this third part, trust. And this part can be really difficult too. And the trust piece is trusting that everyone is doing the best they can with the skills, knowledge, and resources they have access to in that moment. Now, that's not just the children, but that's also you, right? That you're going to be making mistakes, right? And, you may not always be at your best, but we're always trying our best. Now, you might not be at 100%. You might not be at 80%. You might be at 20%. But with your 20%, you're going to be trying your best with where you're at. And that's everyone. And so if we can just believe that and give people that benefit of the doubt, that if they aren't at 100%, maybe there's something that they're struggling with, maybe they might need some support, right? And there are times, especially I know that parents out there can really relate, that there are times where you might feel like you're really doing the parenting thing, you are aligned with your values, you're transitioning, you're able to get from point A to point B with your children. And there's sometimes where you do things that are not aligned with your values, right? And it might be because you might be hungry or tired, or it might be the 100th time that you repeated yourself that day, right? And teachers can relate to that too. there are lots of reasons why we might not be at our best in any particular moment. And it's important for us to just recognize that in ourselves and recognize that in others, and so that we can be in a position to actually guide them and support them and help them and offer them empathy. So see, guide, trust. Have to be able to see a person before you're able to effectively guide a person. Trust that everyone is doing their best with skills, knowledge, and resources they have access to in that moment. So, and we're gonna do this, and then we're gonna get moved towards the breakout session. Meet them where they're at. We have a tendency to just, we know where we want children to be. We have these expectations, right? And our expectations are like the destination. You see the little nav point right there? So we have these expectations, and we expect them to get from Cypress Hill to Rockaway Boulevard. And those are the expectations. We have these expectations, we set these expectations. Children don't always meet those expectations. Now, let me just take a moment. Let me ask in the chat, if you remember MapQuest, put it in the chat if you remember MapQuest. Or you remember, or even you remember the actual paper maps? We actually look at the map and hold it up, like the days before GPS. Oh, you love MapQuest. Yeah, I mean, it was a big step up from just the map. It was a big step up from the map. And so like you remember going to, like you're trying to go, so let's say you're trying to go to your friend's house, right? And when I was, I didn't personally, I was not driving when, before MapQuest, but I remember like if I wanted to go somewhere, like my dad would be like, okay, just print off the MapQuest directions and I'll get you there. So I was a MapQuest kid. But sometimes we would get lost, right? Or we would take a wrong turn. And if you were on the way to your friend's house and you got lost, what would they ask you? What would they ask you? Put in the chat. What would they ask you? You're lost. You call your friend. You say, hey, I'm lost. I'm trying to get to your house. What would they ask you? Where are you? Yeah. Where you at? Like the Boost Mobile commercials. Where you at? Remember the chirps? So where are you at? Right. And you might ask what's around you so that you can figure out like, what do you see? So that you can figure out where they're at, right? Because you have to know where they're at so that you can guide them to where to the destination where they're trying to go, right? Now, if you call your friend and you say, hey, I'm lost, and they ask, okay, where are you at? And you say, I'm at the Stop and Shop, right? I'm at the Stop and Shop. You see the stop, it's on the top right. I'm at the Stop and Shop. What if your friend reacted with like, why are you at the Stop and Shop? I told you to go to Rockaway Boulevard. What are you doing? Like you're missing turns. Like you're not supposed to be there. Oh my goodness, you're so dumb. Why are you there? What's wrong with you? And just berate them for not being where berate us. Like what if your friend berated you for not being where they expected you to be, their house, instead of actually offering help? Would that help you get to the destination? Would it help you get to your friend's house? No, but we do that so often as adults when children don't meet our expectations and they kind of take a wrong turn, and we just berate them and just try to make them feel bad for not meeting our expectations, for not being on Rockaway Boulevard, for being at the Stop and Shop. Instead, you say, oh, you're at the Stop and Shop. Oh, it looks like you missed a turn. Just go down 93rd Street and take a right on Rockaway Boulevard. You should see my house. It's the pink house on the left, right? Right, and you're right. You're probably going to be, if they respond the first way, you're probably going to panic more, and you're going to be. It's going to make it even harder. Even if they do afterwards start telling you where to go, you're going to be a little bit more on edge. You're going to be a little bit more fearful to even ask questions. You make another wrong turn. You might be afraid to ask, like, hey, I ended up on Woodhaven Boulevard. Like, you might not even tell them. You might just be like, you might just hide it, right? Because you're afraid of you don't want to get verbally attacked again for making a mistake, for messing up, for not meeting the expectations. And you don't want to feel, you don't want the person to make you feel bad about that. So, instead of, when children don't meet our expectations, meet them where they're at, right? And there's another thing too. I was doing this talk at a conference, and I had to travel, and my friend had to come to my house to feed my cats, and so she was there. The complex I live in is a little complicated, and so I kind of the where you at thing, and she was like, she kind of told me what she saw. I was like, okay, I think I know where you're at, but I wasn't sure exactly like where she was facing, like where she was turning, because she said she got turned around. But she FaceTimed me. And she FaceTimed me, and she was showing me exactly where she was, just kind of from her perspective. And this is a whole nother level, whole nother layer. And once I saw her perspective, it was super easy then to guide her when I started to see the world from her perspective. So it's great to know, hey, like, oh, you're at the Stop and Shop, and to know where they're at, but it's a whole nother level to get into their perspective and to see the world from their eyes. Then the guidance becomes so much easier. It's easier to offer that empathy and that guidance when you see the world from their perspective. And so, yes, sometimes we have to stop, we have to observe, we have to pause, we have to really see where a child is at. And if we can go that next step, and to not just see where they're at developmentally, but also try to get into their worldview, in their perspective, we're going to be even, we're going to put ourselves in an even better position to guide them and to support them and to get them to where they need to be successful. Also, I've heard the best way to get to know a place is to get lost. The best way, and making mistakes are an essential part of the learning process, right? And so the best way to really learn is to try it and to make mistakes through it. So yeah, thank you for that. Now, a lot of times what gets in the way are, we're going to do the breakout session right after this, because I think this will be important when we're talking about our triggers. A lot of times what gets in the way of us really responding as opposed to reacting is that we get triggered ourselves, right? And we're going to talk about, in the breakout session, it's going to be about our triggers and sharing our triggers. And what you're going to do is you're going to just in the breakout session, you're going to share what your triggers are, what triggers you. And then when we come back, have someone in the breakout session, just pick a representative, a speaker, whatever, in your breakout session to just summarize what the triggers were in the group. So just kind of look forward to that. But a lot of times what gets in the way is that we do get triggered and we have a hard time self-regulating. We have a hard time calming ourselves down so we can get in a place to respond as opposed to reaction. Reactions happen in less than a second. They happen very quickly, but a response is a thoughtful action. Sometimes it takes a little bit more time. And a lot of times our reactions come from our programming or the stuff that we just kind of grew up with. If we were yelled at when we made a mistake, we made a mess, we're going to probably be more likely to do that. Do that when children make mistakes when we become the adult, especially if we don't really create our awareness around what happened and why we do react the way that we react. And that all goes into talking about the brain states. Now, if you've seen this picture, or you're familiar with conscious discipline, you've seen this picture, please put it in the chat. And if you haven't seen it, put that in the chat too. I just kind of want to know where people are at in terms of your familiarity with the brain states. Now, I want to say, as I'm talking about this, that this is really a metaphor. this is a metaphor of what's happening in the body brain. Realistically, the brain and the body are inherently connected and constantly communicating. And this is the brain states is really just to simplify everything that's happening internally with the child. So two things, three things, I'm probably going to start with two, but two big things to know about this is that one, the brain develops bottom up and the brain processes information bottom up. And that executive state, the prefrontal lobes, they're not fully formed until 25, 26. Now, what are these different states? So you have your survival state, your emotional state, and your executive state. The survival state is the state where a person's in a survival state when they're using their survival skills: fight, flight, fawn, freeze. People ask what's fawn. Fawn is like the people-pleasing survival skills, like that. I'll do whatever you want, like just please don't hurt me. Like imagine if someone came up to you and put a gun to your head and they'd say, give me all your money. You'd say, yeah, take all my money, just don't hurt me, I'll do whatever you want, right? That's fawn. That's a survival skill. A lot of times we trigger children into fawn, and using the survival skill fawn, and they'll comply with us, kind of do whatever we want them to do. And we're like proud, we're like, oh, look, that worked. That threat worked because now they're complying with us. And then we measure that. That's a measure of success. But like we will use that as a measure of success. But triggering a child into a survival state is not a flex, right? It's not, that's something to be proud of. Now, especially with young children, it's going to happen because, again, the brain develops bottom up. And so that part of the brain, the executive state, prefrontal lobes, like it's the last part of the brain to really develop. So they're going to be using, and you probably notice with like infants and toddlers, they use a lot of their survival skills very often, right? I was talking earlier how to go into classrooms. I say, what's my name? Mr. Chazz. And I wouldn't really do that in the infant room because if I go in there and they don't really know me, they're not familiar, I go in there, I'm singing with all this, what's my name? Mr. Chazz. Their threat detection, their survival state is going to go off, and the threat detection response is going to go off, and they're probably going to cry or run away, or, and even the toddlers, the kind of like 1 and 2 year olds, they will like, sometimes when they first meet me, like my first time just going in, I'm doing all this stuff, they will, walk to they'll walk, sometimes run to their teacher who they feel comfortable with, or sometimes we had climbers in the classroom where, because we know that 2-year-olds climb, so we put a place where they can climb instead of saying no climbing, no climbing, no climbing. But it's little stairs with a little ramp. It's also it's really good for their development too. They'll go there, and that's like when they don't know me very well and they don't feel very comfortable, they'll go there because it's the highest point in the room that they can go, and helps them feel a little more powerful and a little bit less in a position of where they could, I guess, potentially be like hurt, or they have more power in the situation. They feel like they have more power if they go to a place that's a little bit higher, right? And so the survival state, and because they don't know me, and that part of the brain that is responsible for kind of the self-regulation, that executive state, very beginning stages of developing. So you will see the younger children kind of use these survival skills a little bit more often. And when a child is in a survival state, the question that they're asking is, that their brain is asking is, am I safe? And for a child to be able to move up in their brain, so to speak, they have to be able to answer that question with a yes, I am safe. And the way that we really help them answer that question, a big part of it is with our own regulation, with our own composure, right? To really answer that question for them, that we're safe. Our body language, our tone, our energy has a lot to do with that feeling of safety. A lot of times we will a child will, for example, hit a child, and then we'll come over, we're approaching, and sometimes they'll run away, they'll like hide underneath a table or a desk or something like that, and we'll go over to them, and and they're still underneath the table, and we're like, you need to go apologize for what you did. You need to go, and we're trying to get them to use executive skills when they're in a survival state, and that's not going to be very impactful. That's not going to be very helpful or effective at all. So it's important for us to really see where a child is at, what state they're in, so we know what skills they have access to. So there's a survival state, and then there's the emotional state. The emotional state is kind of like it sounds. It's when we're emotional, right? It could be sometimes, a lot of times for a toddler, it might sound like when they say no, right? And emotions are contagious. A lot of times they'll say no, and then we'll catch that emotions, and then we will kind of react from our emotional state, as opposed to seeing where they're at and seeing the world from their perspective and supporting them from where they're at. We will sometimes just maybe verbally attack them right back. Right? You should know better to say no to me. You never say no to me, and we just start judging them in their behavior, right? For the 3 and 4-year-olds, a lot of times what it sounds like amongst each other, they'll say, "You're not invited to my birthday party," right? Or they might say something like, "I hate you, mom," right? This is coming from an emotional state. When they're in executive state and they're regulated and everything's going well and everything's going well, they're more able to follow your directions. They're more able to take turns. They're more able to do perspective taking, and all these skills that we want children to learn, to practice, and to exhibit. But when they're in an emotional state, it's much harder for them to do that. They're not as able to access those executive skills. And the question that the brain is asking when they're in an emotional state is, am I loved? And one of your greatest tools for this state to answer that question with a yes is connection, right? And those 4 components, the eye contact, touch, playful situation, and presence, right? One of your greatest tools here when a child is in an emotional state, right, is connection. And it's also important to recognize when a person, this isn't just because, also for adults, you'll probably hear adults in an emotional state in the workplace where there are, gossiping about other people, or they are, I talked about in the beginning how, sometimes we'll talk about the boss. Can you believe this person? Such and such and such. That's coming from an emotional state. When we blame someone else, blaming is the discharging of discomfort. And so, when we blame someone, we are not able, it's because we're not able to really handle the emotions that come with, the potential judgment of, making a mistake or being wrong. And we, aren't able to take accountability for our role or part that we played in whatever it was. So we blame someone. So we blame someone else, and we kind of discharge our discomfort, right, onto someone else. That comes from an emotional state, right? And so it's not just children that are in these states, it's us adults too. And the challenge a lot of times is our states, we're fluctuating our states, and children are fluctuating their states too. But our state really dictates their state. We're not going to be able to help a child regulate into an executive state if we are in a survival state ourselves, right? If the child's in a survival state and they trigger us into a survival state, we're not, unless we are able to become aware of that and self-regulate, we're not going to be able to help them move up in the brain to an executive state, and they won't be able to access those skills that they need to meet the expectations that we probably have for them in that moment. So what we need to do is first practice what we preach and regulate ourselves so that we can help, we can co-regulate with the child, which is really helping a person work through their emotions. And that's how, in the way that a child will learn to self-regulate is by having many experiences with co-regulation. That is how a child will learn to self-regulate. Now you might be thinking, but I didn't really have those experiences and I'm an adult, so what am I to do? You have to, it's almost like changing the tires while the car is moving. Like you have to learn and start practicing the skill of self-regulation, the skill to pause, to take a breath, to breathe, to say a mantra, to recognize that you have a choice in what you do, and you can choose how you see the situation, how you're seeing the behavior, and commit to problem solving in a better way, right? And in a healthier way than using fear and control to try to solve a problem. And that takes work, and that's hard, and you're going to mess up through the process. And that is the process. If you're not supposed to be perfect at it. Perfect doesn't exist. I always say, avoid being a perfectionist, be an improvementist. The goal isn't to be perfect every day. The goal is to improve a little every day. So let's get to the executive state. The executive state is where all of our executive skills are. Skills such as task initiation, organization, empathy, perspective taking, goal achievement, prioritization, all these skills time management, all these skills that we want children to practice and have, they're up in the executive state. That's not fully formed until 25, 26, right? And this is the part of the brain that's going to help kind of regulate the child, kind of regulate the other parts, the kind of that emotional state and that survival state. But it's not fully developed till 25, 26. So it's important to understand where a child is at, that a 2-year-old is not, or a 3-year-old is not going to be able to just calm themselves down and just self-regulate and solve whatever problem that they're facing. And just knowing that that is just not where young children are at. And so we have to learn the skills so that we can teach those skills. That's a little crash course on the brain states. Now we're going to go into we're going to do our breakout rooms because it's really important. I've talked about the skill of self-regulation. Part of that, really the first step, is becoming aware of what your triggers are, so that, going into those moments, you're able to, maybe you're triggered by spitting, right? The child spits, like that is something that boils your blood, that grinds your gears. So it's important for you to know that ahead of time, so that when the spitting happens, you're not just reacting unconsciously. You can take a moment to self-regulate and respond in a way that will still align with your values, and not just attack the child back because they attacked you. And now you've caught their emotions, and now you're behaving like a child. You've caught their state, and now it's just two people in a survival state, just going at it, right? And one other thing I want to say about the emotional state is that when we do this, like this judgment, and when we come back at it, we come at children with our emotional state, we create and reinforce the dynamic of me versus you. And it makes it me versus you, as opposed to me and you versus the problem, right? And we need to, to create that dynamic of being me and you versus the problem. We need to be in our executive state so that we are more able to access our skill of empathy, so that they can feel that we're on the same team trying to combat this problem, right? When a child hits another child because they wanted a toy, or someone took their toy and they hit the child, the problem isn't the child is hitting. The real problem is that the child didn't know how to get their toy back, right? They felt an emotion. They didn't know how to handle their emotion. They didn't know how to get their toy back. Or the child really wanted a toy and they didn't know how to ask for a turn or wait for a turn, right? That's the real problem. That's where the work is, right? That's where the growth is, right? But when we just focus on the judging the behavior, you should know better and not to hit, like that's unacceptable. And we just focus on judging the behavior, we make it me versus you. And then they have to be defensive. They have to defend themselves, right? And they get defensive. And when they're defensive and they're defending themselves, and because a lot of times it happens like, well, he did such and such, and or he wouldn't give me the toy. He's never given me a toy, right? They're blaming, they're discharging the discomfort, right? Because they don't want to be judged for what they just did, and so, and now they're feeling like they have to defend themselves. And when they're defending themselves, this is also true for adults. We're not going to be as open to new information, to learning something new, because our fences are up. We're blocking anything that's coming in to protect ourselves. Becky's going to put y'all in some breakout rooms. In the breakout room, I want everyone to share what triggers you. And I will share. Actually, I guess I'll share what triggers me first to kind of get y'all started. And you guys just and then pick a spokesperson, because I want one spokesperson from each group to come up and kind of summarize the triggers of the people that were in the group. Oh, wait. Are we joining? Is everyone still here? No one's joining yet? Okay, cool. Because I want to share my trigger. So, because I mean, we all have our triggers, right? My trigger is when a child hurts another child and I perceive them to have no remorse. I know that's something that triggers me. And I remember the time when I recognized that this was my trigger. And I was in a classroom and I was working with a child who was he was 3 years old, but he was developmentally more in the 2-year-old range. And, just kind of had been kind of all day he was hurting children really inadvertently. He was hurting children really by accident. And he had a hard time understanding where his body was in space and time. So a lot of times he would just kind of like tumble over people. And there's one time I just got, he hurt a person, and then not only did he hurt the person, but I was going over to try to talk to him about it. He had the audacity to look at me and smile. And that is what really you have no remorse. Like, this child is crying and you're smiling at me. Like, do you not understand what, you're doing this on purpose? And so that really triggered me. And I reacted with my emotional state, and I put my emotions on him. And I yelled at him, got probably finger wagging too, and really, behavior is unacceptable. You need to stop. You're hurt. All these things, and really just judging his behavior in a tone that was really, really putting my emotions of feeling frustrated, and overwhelmed out on him, right? And that didn't, surprise, spoiler, didn't it? Well, so it got everyone kind of froze, because I was like, whoa, okay, it's getting real aggressive. So there's triggered a lot of people in the survival state, because pretty much the whole room froze. I was looking, but I triggered the survival state. So there was actually a lot more aggression that started to happen afterwards. For the rest of the day, that was probably the most aggression in the whole room, because it wasn't just the child, it was other children in the room too. And it wasn't just that I influenced other children in the room and this child, I also influenced my co-teacher, because for the rest of the the day, my co-teacher was also getting, her fuse was a little bit shorter. She was quicker to yell and to kind of take an aggressive tone. And this did not make the behaviors any better. Actually, on the opposite, I never wrote more accident reports than that day. Like that was the day where I probably wrote more accident reports than I'd ever written. And it was the emotional climate was just negative. It was not good. And I wasn't really as aware of it in the moment, but in reflection, I was like, man, that is not the person I want to be. And like, this was like, I felt really bad about it because it really went against my values and I felt guilty. So I texted my co-teacher. I said, hey, like, we got to know, like, we got to do better tomorrow. Like, this is not the person that I want to be. The next time we kind of came up with a game plan and like, hey, next time when we're starting to get to that place, we just got to tag each other in. I'm going to breathe. I'm going to count to 10. And so we came up with the game plan. Next day, we followed through with the game plan and it was much better, a lot less aggression. It was so much of a better day because we were intentional about how we were self-regulating and being aware of our own emotions and how they were impacting the children's emotions and their states. So that was a time where I was triggered. I did the harmful thing. But then in reflection, I was able to become aware of it, come up with the game plan to do better. And I also, the next day, also apologized to the kids. I also apologized for my behavior. I took accountability and I apologized and didn't say, hey, I'm sorry for yelling at you or yelling at you guys yesterday, but you guys need to be more careful. No, I just apologize for my actions. The butts keep your butts in your pants. When it comes to apologies, keep your butts in your pants, right? It invalidates your apology of what you actually are apologizing for. And you're really just trying to subvert accountability, right? And still trying to blame and discharge that discomfort instead of just taking accountability for our part, which is what really we need to do. And really what we want to model doing for children. So yes, that's my trigger. That's what I learned. And from then on, I was aware. I just said that I was aware, like, okay, that is my trigger. And I just need to be aware. So like, if any time that does happen now, a child smiling at me, or they're, like when they hurt another child, I know that I need to take a breath. I need a pause, because I'm going to get triggered into an emotional state. So, all right, now go out to breakout rooms and talk about your triggers. Wow, I had a really great conversation. In my breakout room. But I would love to hear about the conversations that you were having in your breakout room. So whoever would like to volunteer and unmute, whoever's spokesperson, come on and
I know I was in your breakout room, but can I go first? My dog really wants to go outside, so
yeah,
I can hear.
go for it, Jenny.
So yeah, we had an awesome conversation. We all heard Chazz's triggers, but some other ones in the group were lying. So something happens and the teacher asks, or the teacher sees something happen, and then children not saying something didn't happen or saying something else happened. Having to repeat yourself over and over again, especially to adults, messy adults, and also like feeling like someone's really like depending on you in an insecure way, like clingy has a negative connotation, but it's something similar like that. We had some deeper conversations about our triggers, which I thought were really interesting. We talked about where we think our triggers come from. And some folks said it was more from like what they were given as a child. And so that's triggering for them. Some said that it's more like what they see in themselves. So they are triggered by that. And then we talked about like this idea that like you can sometimes feel like you have this wealth of patience for children and not the same for adults, and what that really means. And then we also talked about like how some of our closest people have these triggers, but we still adore them. And so that, you know, that connection and relationship aspect is so important when we're seeing people for who they really are and seeing their strengths.
That's a great summary, Jenny. Thank you for sharing. There's someone else to share too.
I can go.
Okay, yep, go ahead. And then I think I see.
So yeah, we found some connection with our triggers, and we also talked about supporting those that are less experienced in the field with some of their challenges in the classroom as well. I'll speak for myself that early on, one of my big triggers was spitting. So when you were talking about that earlier, I really connected with that. And I remember I was remembering a student that was a big spitter that really loved just everywhere they went they found some reason to spit, and helping that kid get past that. The other two that there was a lot of connection around triggers was the parent pickup and the kids that were having a lot of challenges around that transition. With boundaries and even safety stuff, because there's like doors that kids can't be like yanking on, or stuff like that. And then just how to respond to those parents who are being challenged by those boundaries. And thinking too about like our support staff, when you were talking about that executive functioning not really coming into its own until like 25, 26. We work with college students, and a lot of these kids are like 19, and I want to make sure that I'm being patient with them as well. They're responding to behavior sometimes and not the perfect way or the ideal way, or our school's culturally common language kind of stuff. They have a lot to learn and to grow, but it's not just about this instructional stuff. And so it's important that we don't just apply this to, our preschool kids, that we have these support folks that are still got a lot of biological development ahead of them. So you have to, take that in consideration when you're starting to feel a little triggered and you want to go over there and like, that's not how we talk to the kids,
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a bit from us.
Thank you very much for sharing that. Insightful. I will kind of after everyone shares there, I will kind of make comments after. Right now, I'm gonna let y'all shine though. Go ahead. I think I see Leah or Leah.
Leah.
Okay.
So myself and a colleague talked about our triggers, and she shared one that I've definitely experienced, which is a child that seems to be playing at an inappropriate time and doing it while other children are waiting, particularly during a transition. The example that she gave that was a great one is 14 kids in a bathroom with 3 stalls, and really wondering what was so fascinating to this particular kiddo, but responding with, okay, we've got to go, we're transitioning to lunch, and if you want to have your lunch, you can't play, let's go. And we talked about how either the actual urgency around timing and transition, or I've experienced sometimes it's my own perception around timing, like that you want to keep kids on track, so you push through something, and then that 2 minutes of you pushing turns into 15 minutes of a child not getting their needs met, and saying, then everything stops. And it's like, well, gee, we didn't get to lunch any sooner. We didn't get outside any sooner. That was my schedule, my timing. And I wasn't listening or asking, hey, what do you see there? What's so interesting in the toilet? To figure out how to move that child forward.
Mm-hmm.
I shared that the first trigger I thought of was actually what you had mentioned, Chazz, which is a child that seemingly, you said doesn't have remorse, but I almost see it as a child that might be recognizing a trigger about to happen or just testing boundaries. It's that sweet, sweet smile that they give you after you've had a good conversation, you think about throwing a toy, and they look straight at you and they smile, and then the toy gets bounced off your face and you're like, good talk. Okay. That would not, like, boy,
Yeah.
you are just, and even, I mean, I have a couple kids currently that I think are developmentally pretty advanced. They I think, right? So I give them this I guess benefit of the doubt that they're being conscious of what they're doing. And so it's that grab a toy away from a friend, the friend starts bawling, they want to run away, and they do it over and over, and they smile at you. So I share that with you. The other one I just want to quickly mention, and I'd love to get your insight and other people's insight. There's a whole other conversation we could just do on triggers. But one of my triggers is the child that is very insistent about their needs being met first. So the urgency, it usually comes in the form of my shoe, my shoe, my shoe, my shoe, the repeated command, or the coming up and getting very close to you physically. They're in front of friends. A friend could be, I was only half kidding when I said to Faraday, a friend could be on my lap bleeding. This happened last week. And this particular child comes up to me and they need that book read just then. The book, the book, the book. And they have full sentences. They're very articulate, but when they have that need in that moment, they just start repeating louder and louder and louder and more and more and more. And so, I've had some success with just kind of trying to unwind it and figure out what they need in that moment and why they need that comfort and affirmation, and realizing that demand isn't trying to be manipulative and might not become, it's really easy for me to go to my own baggage of, oh, this child is spoiled. They're getting their needs met too quickly. Like they should be able to do that themselves. There's a little bit of that tough love sort of ethnic parenting thing that I came up with that I realized gets, and so anyway, that was my trigger, is the child that's insistent, that continues to just demand attention right away and seemingly has no sense or interest in what else is going on in the class.
Okay. Yeah, I can definitely relate to a lot of what you said. Is that all of the groups? Oh, we have one more group, maybe?
Yep.
Or...
So our group spoke about one of the triggers being when you talk to a child and instead of using their words that they have to respond back, they'll respond back with like screeching or growling or things like that. And then I had shared my personal one is when children are seeking out attention, and it, generally negative attention, and it's things that can be ignored. So you kind of, may focus on other things to try to get some of that positive from them, but then they ramp it up until you can't ignore it. So like, okay, well, I didn't get the attention that I wanted for this behavior, so now I'm going to start throwing chairs or standing on tables where you are like you absolutely have to in that moment respond. And then the other things that were discussed was I know that another person mentioned this, and it's got kind of a negative connotation, but being kind of clingy or very, very needy, where they may like pull on your clothing or things like that, and your hair might be in there or whatever else, but needing that very, very close, immediate attention, maybe even screaming at you to get it at that time. And then our group also talked about being either a young parent or a young educator, and how when you're learning and growing, the challenges that, there are supporting another person that's learning and growing when you're also going through that process. So that was kind of what our group talked about.
I don't know how many breakout rooms we had. That was great. Thank you for sharing. I'm getting notes of what everyone's triggered because I want to talk about what everyone said. Is that everyone?
We have one more group.
Okay.
So my group, we ended up talking about just the triggers that happened between us. And for me personally, one of the biggest triggers that I have right now is, as you've mentioned before, Mr. Chazz, of just the almost remorseless behavior where it's doing the same behavior over and over and over, and having to constantly redirect this energy and this behavior, and then having other children seeing that as almost attention seeking behavior, so then they go and do it, and so you've got a bunch of kids doing the same thing. And I right now have one of these kids who he's never been in childcare. He came in right at the middle of the school year, so he missed out on a huge chunk of when we normally do a lot of that relationship building and connection and trust. So he just came in right in the middle, never had school. He's literally like the little Tasmanian devil. You know exactly where this child has been, because either you can hear him fighting with another child, you can hear other kids screaming because of him, you'll hear bins being dumped out. You know exactly where he is in these moments, to the point where one of us three teachers constantly has to have an eye on him because of what he does. One of my biggest triggers is with this one child, he will just constantly grab in a very aggressive manner, to the point where I was wondering if something was going on at home because of the way he was treating other children. And the parents are the nicest, calmest, chillest, just like, we're besties. Like, these parents and I are great friends. Like, we're constantly talking to each other. We're joking. So it was like, where is this extremely aggressive, face pulling, grabbing children by the back of their hoods, yanking them down, choking these children out? And like, he doesn't know he's doing this, but it is such a repetitive behavior that other children are seeing it, and they see this as like, oh, well, he got attention, so now I want to do this. So it just became to the point where I had to tell other teachers, I do not have the emotional capacity right now to be with this child right now. I do need to take a breath. I will tend to these 4 other children because I am in the emotional state to be with them right now. I need someone else to be with this child. I cannot, because I know he deserves attention and he deserves someone that is in that space to be able to handle him, and I am not. So I'm going to take a step back, or I'll say I need an extra 5 on my break, because that was emotionally a lot for me. So I'm going to go take a break. And when I come back, I'll be a lot better. But it's just recognizing your own self and your own, just like, that was just too much. I have to tap out. I'm all done. Someone needs to step in. And then I oftentimes apologize to the teachers of like, I'm sorry if I did something, or, whatever. That was just a lot for me. So I just needed to take an extra 5. So that's what I've been doing, is just checking in with my teachers as well. And just saying like, hey, do you need to take an extra 5? Like, that was a lot. Like, it seems like that was a lot for everybody. That was extremely stressful. So just recognizing that in with myself and with my other team, because it's, we got 8 one-year-olds in our room. It's a lot. It can be a lot at one moment, as other teachers saying, that you got that clingy kid, you got that one that's needing the attention right then and there. And then we've got the kid that just that I have right now, which is just yanking other children, or you just know where he is at all points because of just his behavior. He's just never been in the space that he had to have boundaries met. So it's just teaching a child that's a trigger.
Well, okay, I think that's the last group. Well, kudos to you to having the awareness of when you're getting to that point. It's honestly one of the most important things. And you can build so much off of that once you have that awareness. So pat yourself on the back and like, that's huge. That's huge. One. Another thing I'm going to say is, as important it is for us to be aware of our triggers, for us to know how to self-regulate, for us to know how to kind of bring ourselves back to an executive state. Say the mantras and breathe and, make the choice to see the behavior differently. If you don't have, a lot of the behaviors that you're seeing that are triggering you happen because the child is feeling something, experiencing something, and they don't know a better way to kind of get their needs met or a better way to solve the problem than the behavior that they're using, right? So like even with if it's attention-seeking behavior, they're wanting connection, but they just don't know how, one, maybe they're not even really aware that that's what they're feeling and that's what they're needing. They're just acting out their emotions. But, they have to learn to kind of we have to practice with them and help them learn how to kind of be aware of what's they're feeling or what they're thinking, and to be able to make a choice and figure out how to solve that problem in a different way. How do I get your attention in a different way? How do I, what is an appropriate way to spit, right? What is an appropriate way to interplay with the child? And so I'm going to go through all of these and talk about kind of what to do, because yes, self-regulation is great, but you can't just be patient. You have to have something to do, right? You have to be able to move forward, because otherwise, like, you're gonna have the patient of a saint, but at some point you're just gonna boil over, and the same problems are going to occur, and there's going to be no progress, and it's going to be more problems are going to come, and that'll compound without you solving some of the old problems. So let's go 25 minutes. Okay, so 25 minutes. So let me go through all of these in 25 minutes. So excuse me if I give a little bit of a condensed version, but I'm going to try to get to all of these and then wrap it up. So lying. Best thing to do is just, if you saw the child like hit or whatever, and you go to the child, instead of setting them up and setting them up for the lie, and be like, did you hit that child? Just say what you already know, the information that you know. I saw you hit the child, or I saw you get frustrated and you pushed a child. Something happened, like, what's going on? And saying what happened, but then also with the tone of like empathy, and you want to exude safety in terms of like, hey, we're not talking about this so you can be in trouble. We're talking about this so that I can help you solve the problem in a different way. Because you hit him for, you're trying to do something, right? You're not just trying to be a bad kid. You're not necessarily saying all of these words, but this is what you are kind of feeling, communicating. You are exuding outward. So they feel safe to tell you what happened, and they'd be like, oh, like, man, like, he was in my space and I told him to get out of my space and he wouldn't, so I pushed him, right? And so now you're like, oh, the problem is like, you wanted to figure out how to get this child, that you wanted to figure out how to get your own space, and you didn't know how else to do it, so you pushed him, right? So say what you know, exude safety. Repeating. For repeating, I would recommend using visuals, because us as teachers, or even as a parent, you're gonna get very tired repeating yourself. And you usually about like 120,000 million times repeating yourself. Your tone starts to get a little bit more frustrated and maybe you're not exuding safety with your tone the 100th time that you're repeating it, especially this being your trigger. So but you know what does not get tired of repeating itself? A visual. So if you could use visuals, sometimes use visual kind of instructions for expectations or even transitions in consciousness when we talk about MAP, right? The acronym MAP. Modeling, add visuals, and practice. So if it's something that is the same thing that's happening over again, you're finding yourself repeating, do those things. Model, add visuals, practice. Clingy, screaming for attention. Again, the problem isn't that they're clingy. The problem isn't that they are wanting attention. Because really, and I'm actually going to, before I even give the what to do, I'm going to give them a reframe. Instead of looking at it as attention-seeking behaviors, look at it as connection-seeking behaviors. They're really just wanting connection from you, and they just don't know how else to get it. And they'll, children will often ask for love in the most unlovable ways. So what do you do here is acknowledge, okay, yeah, you wanted my attention, you wanted to play with me, you wanted to, whatever, there's something here that you wanted. When you want my attention, next time say, excuse me, Mr. Chazz, or when you want my attention, next time, squeeze my hand. When you want my attention, next time, whatever it is that they can do to in a more appropriate way to get your attention, you want to practice that. You want to model that. You can go through a whole, even with your co-teacher, you can even do a little role play and like, okay, now you try. Now I'm going to pretend to talk to my co-teacher and you want my attention, practice, doing what we practiced, what we talked about, what you just saw, what I just modeled. And then come up, squeeze your hand or whatever. But give them a way to try to get attention, get connection in a better way. And I'll also say, if you're not familiar, Dr. Becky Bailey came out with a book called I Love You Rituals. And it's a whole book of little connection rituals that have those 4 components of eye contact, touch, playful situation, and presence. And a lot of them are kind of like nursery rhymes and things like that, but with like motions and actions that build connection. They're little connection boosters. And so you could, if you did this, you'd have to teach them the I love you rituals. And then also maybe even have a visual somewhere, just like, hey, like whenever you are asking, one, it'd be good to be proactive about it and maybe have a time they're coming in the classroom and they get to choose the I love you ritual that they get to do. It's called I Love You Rituals by Dr. Becky Bailey. They can go in and they can choose the I love you ritual that they do. And there's a bunch of nursery rhymes, but they're like nursery rhymes that are changed and adapted, because if you know anything about the history of nursery rhymes, a lot of them don't have the best messages for children. So they're changed. And they even have one, they also have a Spanish one that's adapted to fit more culturally with Hispanic culture. So they have one that's in Spanish, and they have an English one. So I would recommend that. But also, if you're doing that and that's something that you're doing, that they can point to it, or 2, they can, you can also talk to them about when you want attention, when you want connection, you can just come up to me and ask to do the I love you ritual, right? Or ask for a hug, or ask, to play, or ask for a high five. It's going to take some time, and this is something you're going to have to repeat and over and over and over and over again, because it takes time for children. It's a new skill. It takes time for children to learn skill to recognize what they're feeling and making the choice, remembering and making the choice that's going to meet their need in a more appropriate way. So it takes time. It'll take practice, but it's much better than just, all right, I'm just going to self-regulate and allow this to just keep on happening and just be frustrated every day of my life with no progress at all. Also, spitting. I'd say spitting isn't an inherently bad thing. It's just like, hey, these are the places you can spit. Spit in the trash can, spit in the sink. This is where you spit. It sounded like the spitting wasn't necessarily spitting out of like anger or frustration. That happens too, but and even that, it's like, it's practicing communicating how they feel instead of just going to the spitting. Like, I feel bad because you won't let me go to block center, right? Practicing saying that and validating that feeling and connecting with them and getting empathy and really hearing them out too. And that's more effective even for them than just a spitting. They get more of the outcome of what they're trying to do, what they're trying to be seen or heard and understood and trying to argue their case. Teach them to, practice communicating with it. If it's out of the anger, if it's out of anger or frustration, then you'd want them to practice using words to express how they're feeling instead. If it's just a spitting, just because maybe it's a sensory thing or they just like to spit, just let them know where the spitting stations are and where it's okay to spit. Parent pickup and drop off can both be triggering for lots of different reasons. I mean, that's something where parent pickup can also be kind of unpredictable. It also might be, I don't know what it is exactly about parent pickup that is triggering. If you could kind of put that in the chat, maybe I'll have time to come back to it. Like, what about parent pickup? I'm sorry if you already said it and you have to repeat yourself. And meet me where I'm at, please. Messiness. Messiness. This was messiness for the adult. Oh, hello.
I have a question.
Yeah.
This is Yolanda. Can I go ahead and ask you a question?
Yeah.
When you said, what do you mean about the parent pickup? I'm hard of hearing. What I was saying was, like, when a parent come pick up their child and the child tell the parent, you need to wait till I finish my project. So I kind of just sat there, like, you time me, it's like the parent still waiting on the child 15 minutes. So I kind of like encourage him, kind of play with him, like, oh, let's get your coat on. Your daddy's waiting for you. Your mom's going to cook you some dinner. So let's help you get your coat. Because, like, they're sitting there for 15 minutes for waiting for the child. But I thought that one time when the child said, no, Dad, you wait till I finish my art project. So Dad just sit there away. And one time the child said, no, you put my coat back in the cubby. So it was like, we both were trying to figure out a way to do it. So I was like, oh, you know what? Your dad is waiting for you. Come on, let's get our coat. We can take your art project to home. You can finish that at home. How about that? So she get her coat, get it there. Okay, then they just leave. It's like they be here 15, 20 minutes. So I try not to get involved in that, but I try to encourage my student, instead of the way she talk her dad, the dad like, okay, I'm gonna stay here. You know what I mean? Is that a better way to do it, or?
I mean, as the, for parent pickup, I mean, I kind of feel like that's really kind of a parental decision of how they want to handle it. Cause I don't know, different parents have different, they're like, hey, like I have to go. So like, there is no, I don't really have time to wait. And that can kind of create, I might trigger the child and the child doesn't know what to expect. They don't know when they're getting picked up. And so that can be a tough, and sometimes they have lots of time and they're like, maybe they really do value the child having time to do artwork. And so like really I would kind of talk to the parent and see kind of how, kind of see where their perspective and their kind of feelings on it. But I saw someone said something about visual schedule. Yes, visual schedule could be helpful. I would actually recommend for this specific situation, maybe a visual timer, so that they can see how much time. So if it is, you said 15 minutes, 15 minutes is a long time for a parent to kind of sit and wait. I mean, if they have the time and that's their life, and sure, more power to you. But I know a lot of parents don't really necessarily have that time. I would recommend using a visual timer. And the one that I like is the one that communicates time with color. And so I would be like, okay, well, you have 5 minutes to finish. I think if the parent picks up at a consistent time every day, then that's really good. You can kind of definitely give warnings and like, hey, it's around 4:30, so your dad's going to be coming soon, to kind of prepare that child to kind of reduce the friction of that transition. So
Okay, thank
that's
you.
what I would.
Yeah, because the parents we still like to wait, and he repeated. Like you said, he said, "I'm waiting. I gotta wait. We gotta go do this. We gotta do that." So maybe I should do that, a timing for her.
Yeah.
Like I said, I have a respect for the parent, but once you sign out, I have no control of it. So
Yeah, right. Where it's like, yeah, this is
yeah,
that's your kid now. Like I'm having no more.
right.
You parent the way you want. I'm not gonna get into, but yeah, talking to the parent and really saying like
Okay.
maybe coming up with a plan and saying like, hey, like, are you? So what's do you plan on coming like the same time every day? Because I can kind of prepare him so that he's more ready to go, and I can also try to make sure not to like have them start an art project or whatever it is, just so the child knows what to expect. That often reduces the friction of the transitions. Visual schedule can be helpful. Visual timers are also very helpful. I could say so much about visual timers, but I'm going to move on to the next.
Okay.
The one that I recommend too, I actually have linked in my social media bio if you find it, but there's a bunch on Amazon. There's so many that are made.
Okay.
Um,
Thank you. It's something that my coworker could work on. She's a closing person. Okay. Thank you.
Yep, no problem. Messiness, and the messiness was more directed towards messiness of a teacher. I would say, for teachers, I'm a messy person, and I worked with people who are not messy at all. They're very like they will, say I'm OCD and all that jazz, and say and really I think it's just about kind of collaborating and just kind of communicating like together and just being empathetic to really each other, because as a messy person, it might trigger me that you need everything to be exactly the way that it has to be before we go outside, because your cleanliness or your OCD is slowing up my transition, and the kids are waiting and now they're beating each other up. So I might be triggered too. So like they could go both. So I really think it's just about communicating, especially with adults, and just working together to try to find so we got to both meet our needs. And now I can, like I'm working in the classroom right now. And there was a period of time where I was kind of working with another teacher. And so I would even check in like, hey, but this is too messy. Was I not like this okay? We communicate. And then when I got my own room, it's just messy. I have no one to answer to, and it's messy, and it's not a problem for anyone. Kids don't mind. I don't mind. Everything's fine. My teacher desk is a mess all the time. So I just think you just gotta work. And then also too, visuals can be very helpful, especially when communicating, when if it's like a family or children are just like, hey, this is what the center should look like when it's done. Playing during transitions. Oh man. And I think this was Leah. She was also talking about the perception of time and how like we perceive like it's like time is starting to like in our body, like we're feeling like we're late, we're behind schedule, and that can trigger us and sometimes cause us to do things that actually make things longer than what it would be if we just were able to just be present and accept that things are going to take as long as they take. Never mind. That things are going to take as long as they take, and to just accept and just be present in that moment. And sometimes I would transition. Sometimes we need to just do like sometimes we need to just do a reset of things, and maybe it's singing a song, maybe doing a little dance, having a little dance party. Sometimes we just need to reset so that we can move forward. I think one of the challenges that like I think you said like 14 kids, 3 bathrooms, and that lunchtime, that lunch nap transitions can be very overwhelming. It's the busiest time of the day. And there are children who are playing during it, but you're trying to get lunch and everything, and things got to be on time. Lunch, you have to have lunch on time so that we can have everyone use the bathroom and go down for nap, so that we can get our breaks on time, so that I can get a break from you, so I can get my much needed and well-deserved break. And all of that like can just create a lot of stress. there's a lot I could say about transitions too. I think I'm going to, what's the most? One, I don't think I love, honestly, the most successful transitions are always the ones that I play through. I do playful transitions. I do playful transitions all the time. And it's so much more smooth than like the trying to be like strict and be on everyone kind of transition. And depending on the transition, like depends on like, if you're transitioning, like you're moving from one place to another place, the playful transitions could be very helpful. Sometimes with like the lunch transition, it's just like so many things are happening and not everyone's doing the same thing at the same time. So that might be a little bit more difficult. But like if it's like we're trying to get outside or trying to get to from point A to point B, I will like, all right, so hop in your boat. All right, row your oars. All right, everyone's got your oars. All right, we're gonna row our boat. Sing with me. Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Wait, oh no, you hear that? I think it might be a bird. You don't want the bird to see us. Let's do it quietly. Right, and so like that is so engaging that like you don't have kids running off from one side and doing all the other things because they're just engaged in what's happening in the play that we're doing. But for like the bathroom transitions, and I think someone also mentioned insistent about needs being met first. Acknowledge what they are, what they're trying to do. Like, so you have the kid who's bleeding. You have the kid who's literally in your lap who's bleeding, and the kid's coming up to you and it's like, book. Acknowledge, you want me to read a book right now? Yeah, book. Then say, so-and-so is bleeding. Once I help this person, after I help this person, then I'll read a book to you, right? I think a lot of times children are really just like push us and really like insistent about things because they don't know when they're going to actually get that connection, when they're actually going to get the book. And sometimes we're not really good at communicating when that thing is going to happen. Or sometimes maybe the thing can't happen or it's not going to happen. And being very clear and confident about our no, and also being very empathetic about them being upset that the thing that they're wanting is not happening. Yeah, it's tough. It's disappointing when you want a book to be read to you and I have to help a child, with a nosebleed or someone got hurt. Yeah, I know that's really tough for you. And the child also might even be able to redirect that child. Children love jobs. They also might be able to, oh, can you help me help this person? Can you get me a wet paper towel? Or can you get me could even be something that you barely even need. Just the fact that it's a job, that they'll feel like good about it and they'll feel empowered and will kind of boost that connection a little bit. And you can help the child that you need to help. And the child is really getting their need met. And really their need is probably, maybe not necessarily to read a book, but they might just want connection, right? Or maybe they're really interested in what's in the book. And it might be disappointing that they can't read the words yet. Like that's tough. Not using words, using growls. When they're talking, I know I only got a few minutes left, so I got to be even condense this even more. Not using words, using growls. That's even say like you want, so we can say, a lot of times we say, use your words. But the problem with that is that a lot of times we don't help them with the words to use. So tell them the words that you use, like, oh, you want my attention, or you want a turn, or you want snack. Next time say, may I please have snack, right? Say, may I please have snack? The little script there that you can use. You want it next time, right? The you want it is that empathy piece. It's that seeing piece. And the next time is that guidance piece. It's that problem solving piece. You wanted a turn. Next time say, turn please. But for the toddlers, turn please. You wanted my attention. Next time, squeeze me on the hand. You wanted a hug. Next time, ask for a hug, right? Or you wanted him to hug you more gently. Next time, say, hug me gently, right? same behavior over and over and over, constantly redirecting, grabbing. And you mentioned this was a 1-year-old. It is gonna be a lot of redirecting. It is gonna be a lot of empathy. It is gonna be a lot of teaching. And, I would suspect though, that this 1-year-old is probably maybe trying to interplay, maybe trying to play with these children. And they just don't know how to do it. So if you can communicate to this child, to this 1-year-old, of kind of just, or through modeling, through, I don't know how many words the 1-year-old has, but even just like even a turn please. They're using 2-word sentences, turn please, and the hand like this, if they're asking for a turn, is better than like to show this and to model it, because if not, they'll be more likely to grab, and it's less of like waiting. Your hands like this, you're communicating that I'm waiting for a turn, right? And with 1-year-olds and other 1-year-olds, they're not doing a lot of using words, so a lot of gestures are going to be helpful, and very short words. Now you're learning while you're teaching. Guess what? Even though you might not be, you might be a teenager, you might not be 25, 26, your brain may not be fully formed, but and when your brain is fully formed, we're still learning while we're teaching. We're still messing up. We're still making mistakes. And it's an essential part of the learning process. So, be thankful that you are, even in a place where you're young enough to start learning these skills young, because when you get to a place when you're older, your skills are going to be so much better than the people who started learning in their older age, right? We have a lot of unlearning to do, right? The people who have been doing it the same way for 50 years, it's a lot harder for them to, it can be more difficult because there's so much unlearning that they have to do on top of the learning what to do instead. So that's actually a really great advantage, and really give yourself empathy and compassion. Avoid being a perfectionist, be an improvementist. The goal isn't to be perfect every day. The goal is to improve a little every day. And I think I addressed that tendency and behavior instead of ignoring it. Really try to communicate, this is how you get my attention, right? This is how you meet that need, and in a more appropriate way. And I think I hit all of them. Yeah, I think so. This is my 3rd time saying it, and I'm going to say it again because it is the most important thing, more important than everything that I've said. The most important thing is that, actually, I'm going to add another one. Conflict is an opportunity for learning. These conflicts and these hard times, and even the hitting and the parent pickup and the spitting and the getting triggered by your messy co-teacher, these are all opportunities for learning and for growth. And mistakes are an essential part of the learning process. Perfection does not exist. The goal is not to be perfect every day. The goal is to improve a little every day. So have compassion for yourself, have compassion for others, the children and the adults, and keep on learning and reflecting and improving. Be an improvementist. And that's it. That's my time.
Wow, Mr. Chazz, you are such a rock star. That was an incredible 2 hours. I actually skipped our official break because I did not want to interrupt you. And I didn't want us to miss out on just the incredible wisdom that you always have to share. So thank you so much. I'm really holding that See, Guide, Trust reminder. And as well as that last piece you shared about see conflict and mistakes as part of the learning process and see them as an opportunity rather than a sign of failure. I think for me personally, that's where I'll get triggered, like, oh, if this isn't working with this kid or this coworker, I'm failing somehow. And I just love that reminder to shift towards an opportunity perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you so much. We are at time at 12:31. In the chat, if you did not get a chance to sign in, if you'd like STARS, continuing education credit for the state of Washington, or just a participation certificate, please go ahead and sign in there. I've put Mr. Chazz's link as well to all of his social media feeds, his coaching opportunities, his Patreon community. And last but not least, our next Institute event, I think, is going to be a perfect segue to Chazz's workshop today. It's going to continue to go into how do we respond to challenging behaviors in a way that not only is healing for the child, but healing for us and helping us reduce our reactivity around our own triggers. So we hope that you can make it to that event. Please feel free to come off mute if you'd like to offer just any words of appreciation. I think Chazz and I are happy to stick around for a few extra minutes if anyone has any final closing questions. So thank you all so much for being here.
Yeah. Thank y'all for coming out. This is great.
Thank
This
you
is always such a great group.
so much. That was really
Fantastic.
helpful. And
Yeah. Thank you for being here. Happy to do it.
Very excited to share with my co-teachers, sport teacher, but also my husband, some great takeaways. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Leah.
Hilltop is always such a great group to speak to. I honestly, I appreciate, hopefully I'll see y'all again next year. And we can do this again because it's always, they're always such an engaged group with great questions and thoughts. And I just appreciate being in this space with so many educators here and parents on this journey. And you guys are really doing, you know, like we're all here together. We're all doing the work together. And I appreciate y'all too. I appreciate y'all.